Hello, once again. This is going to be the last podcast for Unit 9, Biochemistry. One of the overarching questions for this unit is why is carbon in all living things and why is it very important? As you could tell from this picture, you could see on wind turbines here. So it has something to do with energy. We have a nuclear power plant here and we have cars here as well. What do all these things have in common? You decide what that is, but I will talk more about that later. Why is carbon in all living things going into the chemistry? And it all has to do with valence electrons. We've learned about this in the past. Valence electrons are the electrons in an atom that are found in the outermost area of an atom. Okay, because carbon is in column 4A, it has 4 valence electrons, so it can bond to 4 different atoms. Okay, so carbon has a potential to bond 4 times. Okay, that is the maximum amount of atoms that it could bond with. It doesn't mean it has to bond to 4 different atoms, but most of the time it will. Carbon likes to bond a lot with atoms. 2, this is due to its 4 valence electrons. And 3, because of this ability to bond, carbon is essential in all living things. So because it bonds really well and it bonds to a lot of things, carbon is found mostly in everything that we eat. It's found in gasoline, it's found in oil, it's found in petroleum, it's found in apples, oranges, fatty foods, right? Carbon is in pretty much everything. It's found in our air, it's found in our waste, it's pretty much everywhere. Our friend carbon, so again, because of carbon's unique bonding characteristic, this allows it to form repeating structures. Large biological molecules are just repeating structures of smaller carbon units. We talked about polymers and we talked about the little subunits, the little Legos. Those are repeated various times and it makes up these large biological molecules. So what is the structure of biological molecules? We talked already about proteins, right? Proteins are made up of chains of amino acids, and this is how amino acid looks like. It has a nitrogen group here, it has carbon in the middle, it has a hydrogen sticking out of it, another carbon, and then this is called a carboxyl group, which is made up of carbon, oxygen, oxygen, and hydrogen. So I don't need you to memorize this, but just know that in college you will have to memorize this. If you take AP biology, you will have to memorize this. So just know that the amino acid has a nitrogen group here. This is called a nitrogen group. It has NHH. It has a hydrogen. It has a carboxyl group, which is COOH. And it has some random group of molecules down here. This is called your R group. Okay, R is just some variable that could stand for any chain of atoms. Okay, when you put all these amino acids together, they form something called proteins. Here are the structure of various proteins found in medications, found in the food that you eat. These are 3D structures of how proteins look like. The second one we talked about was DNA and RNA, nucleotides. DNA is made up of repeating units called nucleotides. In this picture, this is one nucleotide. It has 3 parts: a phosphate group, a sugar, and a nitrogen base. So I need you to know these 3. Okay, don't memorize the structure, but just know that it has a phosphate group, it has a sugar, and it has a nitrogen base. Okay, that's one nucleotide. When you put a whole bunch of nucleotides together, you make a strand of DNA or RNA. Okay, and that is called a nucleic acid. Okay, so again, that answers the question of the comment of large biological molecules are just repeating structures of smaller carbon subunits. So again, amino acids are subunits that make up proteins. Nucleotides here are smaller subunits that make up nucleic acids. In this case, it's DNA, which stores our genetic information. And the last one I want to talk about are monosaccharides. And monosaccharides are just individual sugars And when they're linked together, like here in this slide, when they're linked together, they form a polymer called a carbohydrate. For example, this specific one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 6 glucose molecules linked together, and this forms a starch polymer. Okay, starch is a carbohydrate that's found in potatoes, it's found in plants. It's a complex sugar because it has a lot of glucose molecules, so it's considered a complex molecule. And the monomer is just one glucose. I also want you to note here that the edges and corners represent carbon. Okay, in organic chemistry, this little dot right here, this little corner here, 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 okay, where the arrows are here, here, here. Those little edges, those little corners represent carbon. Okay, scientists don't want to write carbon every time, so instead they just do this. They they draw squiggly lines, and each little edge it's considered a carbon. And then from that carbon, there should be 4 things sticking out if they all have single bonds. So here there's a carbon, and on one side there's one carbon, and on the other side there's a hydrogen, and then on the other side there's another carbon, and then on the other side there's an oxygen. So there are 4 things sticking out of this carbon right here. Um, so just know that in chemistry, the carbons are represented by corners or edges, and then the other atoms are represented in a written way where you could actually see it, right? Um, the next question is, how are fossil fuels connected to biochemistry? And you guys learned about fossil fuels last year. Fossil fuels are basically oil and coal. They form due to the pressure that is exposed to matter. And coal and oil can be burned or combusted to release a huge amount of energy. The good thing about fossil fuels is that it releases a good amount of energy, and we could use that in cars, we could use that to power our homes. But the bad thing about it is that it releases a lot of carbon dioxide and a lot of waste. And that is what's causing climate change, like um, this phenomena called global warming, where our temperatures are expected to rise, and because of that water levels go up. The ice caps are melting, again causing the water levels to go up, means less land there's going to be. um, so fossil fuels are huge in environmental science, and it's something that's studied in mostly all science classes. So again, a reminder about what fossil fuels are. Fossil fuels are made of carbon and hydrogen. Okay, they are called hydrocarbons. Okay, so the word hydro means hydrogen, carbon is carbon. So hydrocarbons are molecules that are made up of hydrogen and carbon. Okay, an example of a hydrocarbon are fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are made of carbon and hydrogen. They are energy rich, so they have a lot of potential to release a lot of energy. And they're called organic. Organic is any compound, anything that has carbon in it is considered organic. If it doesn't have carbon, then it's called inorganic. And examples of fossil fuels are coal and oil, which we typically burn to give off a lot of heat. So again, hydrocarbons are any long chain molecule that contains only carbon and hydrogen. For example, in this picture, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 carbons. So this is called octane, okay, octane, with the electrons being shown. But remember, each for every 2 little dots or electrons, you draw one bond. So the carbon satisfies the octet rule here, because there's 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Surrounding carbon, there are 8 electrons. So this is a stable atom, and when these carbons are broken, they release a huge amount of energy. For example, octane is what's put inside of cars, okay, to power up our cars and drive us where we need to go. And just a reminder, the bonds in hydrogens have energy. When hydrocarbons are combusted or burned, a large amount of energy is released, but CO2 is released as a product, and that's what causes um, the temperatures to rise in our immediate environment, because carbon dioxide tends to absorb heat. Um, And the last point is this large amount of heat or energy can be used to power cars, factories, and so forth. So I already spoke about that. So in a car, in a vehicle, just know that air tends to go into the vehicle. The fuel is some sort of hydrocarbon like octane. It enters through the pistons. Of chemical reaction, a combustion reaction happens here as soon as the spark the spark um, turns on. Okay, serves as a catalyst to start this combustion reaction. As soon as heat is released, heat is energy that powers up your vehicle, makes it run, and at the same time, it releases a lot of byproducts like um, nitrogen, nitrogen oxide, nitric oxide, waste, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide is also released. So I would just know that fuel goes in, um, the spark causes the chemical reaction to start, so it serves as a catalyst, and then it releases a huge amount of energy, which pumps the engine and it releases waste as a byproduct. Um, a few more things I want to talk about are three different types of hydrocarbons. The first one are called alkanes. Because there's a letter A, just know that this is the simplest of them all. They're simple hydrocarbons. They have carbons connected to only single bonds, meaning around carbon there should only be single bonds. So here's an example. Methane has one carbon surrounded by four hydrogens. Ethane has two carbons surrounded by hydrogens. Propane and butane, I would like you to memorize these. Just know that methane is CH4. Um, Propane is C3H8, okay? Ethane is C2H6, and butane is C4H10. So the way I would know it is just draw one carbon surrounded by hydrogens, and now you know that it's CH4. Ethane is two carbons, so put all the hydrogens around it, and now it's C2H6. Okay. Um, the next group of hydrocarbons are called alkenes, and alkenes are hydrocarbons that have at least one double bond. So they must have at least one double bond. As you could tell, ethene has a double bond here, surrounded by two hydrogens. Or again, it has to satisfy the octet rule. So it it's only surrounded by two hydrogens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 electrons on each side of the atom. Remember, each line represents two electrons. So if you go back, ethene is different from ethane in that ethane has only single bonds. And notice how ethane has a little a there because it's an alkane. Alkene has an e, so this is called ethene instead of ethane. Propene, butene, okay, they all have a double bond. So if I give you pictures and I tell you which of the following is not an alkene, you choose the one that does not have a double bond. Okay, so just know the structure. Alkynes is the last one. Again, alphabetical order. A, alkane is the simplest, so it has only single bonds. Alkene is um, is the one with at least one double bond, so it's considered an alkene. And alkyne with a Y, this is the one that has at least one triple bond. So this is ethene. Notice how there's a Y there, propene, and butene. Okay, these are all hydrocarbons here. What they have in common is that they're all made up of carbon and hydrogen, and their bonds can be broken to give out a huge amount of energy for our energy needs. And the last hydrocarbon I want to go over are called aromatic hydrocarbons. Just know that these carbon atoms bond with other carbon atoms to form a ring, okay? They're atoms that bond to form rings. Here are some examples: benzene, toluene, naphthalene. They all form ring structures, and they're also considered hydrocarbons because they have carbons and hydrogens. And the last thing I want you to know is just this summary right here about hydrocarbons. They're made up of carbon and hydrogen. Their bonds are broken to release energy. They consist of alkanes, alkenes, alkynes. And it all depends on the bonds. Is it a double bond? Is it a single bond? Is it a triple bond? And the last thing is that hydrocarbons consist of aromatic rings as well. So they don't have to be linear, but they could form rings as well.